The world remembers Bob Marley as a peaceful reggae prophet who spread messages of love, unity, and resistance. But what they don't tell you is that Bob Marley died at 36 because he refused medical treatment for religious reasons, was exploited by nearly everyone around him, fathered 11 children with 7 different women while preaching monogamy, and may have been assassinated by the CIA. The real story of Bob Marley is filled with violence, betrayal, poverty, and a tragic death that could have been prevented. And it all started with a white father who abandoned him, and a society that never let him forget he was mixed race. Today, we're uncovering the truth about Bob Marley, the man behind the legend, and why the people closest to him couldn't save him from himself. Robert Nesta Marley was born on February 6, 1945, in a tiny village called 9 Mile in rural Jamaica. But Bob's birth was controversial from the very beginning because his father was white and his mother was black, and in 1940s Jamaica, that was a problem. Bob's father, Norval Sinclair Marley, was a 50-year-old white British naval officer. His mother, Cedella Booker, was an 18-year-old Jamaican girl. Norval got Cedella pregnant and married her to avoid scandal, but he never actually lived with her or Bob. In fact, Norval's family was horrified that he had married a black woman. They essentially disowned him, and Norval, being the coward that he was, abandoned Cedella and baby Bob almost immediately. He would occasionally send money, but he never visited, never held his son, never acted like a father. Bob only saw his father a handful of times in his entire life. The last time was when Bob was about 5 years old. Norval showed up, said he wanted to take Bob to Kingston to get him a proper education. Cedella hesitantly agreed, thinking this was Norval finally stepping up as a father. But Norval didn't take Bob to school. He left him with an elderly woman in Kingston and disappeared again. Bob lived with this stranger for months until Cedella tracked him down and brought him home. Bob's own father had essentially kidnapped him and then abandoned him with a stranger. This abandonment shaped everything about Bob. He grew up feeling like he didn't belong anywhere. In Jamaica, there was a harsh racial hierarchy. If you were white, you had privilege. If you were black, you were the majority, but still dealing with colonial oppression. But if you were mixed, what Jamaicans called brown, you existed in this painful in-between space. The other kids in 9 Mile tormented Bob relentlessly. They called him Yellow Boy and White Boy because of his lighter skin and curly hair. They mocked him for not having a father. They excluded him from games and activities. Bob learned to fight. He had to. He got into constant scraps, defending himself. Despite being small and skinny, Bob was scrappy and refused to back down. This toughness, this refusal to be broken, became a core part of who he was. But the rejection hurt. Bob later said in interviews that he never felt fully accepted by either black or white communities in Jamaica. He was too black for white society, too white for black society. He belonged nowhere. His mother, Cedella, tried her best. They were desperately poor, living in a tiny shack with no electricity or running water. Cedella worked multiple jobs just to feed Bob. She sang to him constantly, gospel songs, folk songs, anything to keep their spirits up. Bob absorbed music like oxygen. When Bob was 10 years old, his father Norval died of a heart attack. Bob never got to confront him, never got answers, never got an apology, just another abandonment. In 1957, when Bob was 12, Cedella made a desperate decision. She moved them to Trenchtown, a government housing project in Kingston that was essentially a slum. She hoped there would be more opportunities in the city. But Trenchtown was rough. Poverty, violence, gangs, and desperation everywhere. Bob hated it at first. He missed the countryside. But Trenchtown gave him something 9 Mile never could: music. The yards of Trenchtown echoed with music constantly. People played drums, guitars, improvised instruments from whatever they could find. Sound systems blasted ska and early reggae. Aspiring musicians gathered in yards to practice and perform. Bob fell in love with music completely. He taught himself guitar by watching other musicians. He had a natural ear for melody and rhythm, and most importantly, music gave him a place where he finally belonged. In Trenchtown, Bob met the people who would change his life. Neville "Bunny" Livingston, later Bunny Wailer, became his closest friend and eventual bandmate. Peter Tosh, another talented musician, joined their circle. The three of them started making music together, harmonizing, writing songs, dreaming of escaping poverty. At 16, Bob dropped out of school completely to pursue music full-time. His mother was worried. Music wasn't a real job, she said. How would he survive? But Bob was determined. He worked briefly as a welder to make money, but music was his obsession. In 1963, Bob, Bunny, and Peter formed a group called the Wailers. They were teenagers with raw talent and nothing to lose. They recorded their first single, "Simmer Down," which became a massive hit in Jamaica. Suddenly, Bob Marley wasn't the outcast mixed-race kid anymore. He was a star. People recognized him on the streets. Girls screamed his name. The Wailers were the hottest thing in Jamaican music. But success brought new problems. The Wailers were broke despite their hit songs. Record producers in Jamaica were notorious for exploiting young artists, paying them pennies while keeping all the profits. Bob and the group made almost no money from "Simmer Down," despite it being #1 in Jamaica for months. Bob was also falling in love. He met a girl named Rita Anderson, a beautiful singer with a voice like honey. Rita was everything Bob needed. She believed in him, supported his music, and understood the struggle. They got married in 1966 when Bob was 21. But just one day after the wedding, Bob did something that would change everything. He left Jamaica and moved to Delaware to live with his mother, who had remarried and moved to America. Bob needed money. He needed to support Rita and his future. So he took a job working in a Chrysler factory and a warehouse, doing manual labor for $50 a week. For 8 months, Bob Marley, the rising reggae star, worked a factory job in America, sending money home to Jamaica, dreaming of returning to music. But here's what nobody tells you. While Bob was in America working to support his family, Rita was home in Jamaica discovering something that would change Bob's entire worldview. And when Bob returned to Jamaica in 1967, he wasn't just a musician anymore. He had become a believer in something that would eventually kill him. When Bob returned to Jamaica in 1967, Rita told him about something that happened while he was gone. She claimed she had seen Jesus Christ in the form of Haile Selassie I, the Emperor of Ethiopia, who had visited Jamaica. This might sound crazy to outsiders, but in Jamaica, Rastafari was a growing religious movement. Rastas believed that Haile Selassie was the Messiah, the second coming of Christ, and that black people would eventually return to Africa, their promised land, and be freed from Babylon, the oppressive Western system. Rita's experience moved her deeply, and she convinced Bob to explore Rastafari. Bob, who had always felt like an outcast, found something in Rastafari that spoke to his soul. Here was a belief system that said black people were divine, that they deserved liberation, that suffering had meaning. Bob dove headfirst into Rastafari. He grew his hair into dreadlocks, which was a radical statement in 1960s Jamaica. Dreads were associated with madness, poverty, and criminality. People crossed the street to avoid Rastas. Police harassed them constantly, but Bob didn't care. Rastafari gave him identity, purpose, and a message bigger than himself. His music transformed. Instead of love songs and party tracks, Bob started writing about oppression, resistance, spirituality, and liberation. The Wailers became a revolutionary band. But revolutionary music doesn't pay bills. The Wailers were still broke. They recorded constantly, but made almost nothing. The Jamaican music industry was controlled by producers who treated artists like disposable commodities. Bob, Bunny, and Peter tried everything to break through. They worked with different producers, recorded dozens of songs, experimented with different sounds, but nothing translated to real money or international success. During this time, Bob fathered multiple children with multiple women. Rita had given birth to several children, but Bob was also having affairs and getting other women pregnant. This wasn't unusual in Jamaican culture at the time, and Rita largely accepted it, but it created complicated family dynamics that would haunt Bob's legacy. By the early 1970s, Bob was nearly 30 and still struggling. The Wailers had been making music for almost a decade, with little to show for it. Peter and Bunny were frustrated. The dream was dying. Then in 1972, they met a man who changed everything. Chris Blackwell, a white Jamaican record executive who owned Island Records. Blackwell saw something special in Bob Marley. He offered the Wailers a deal. A real recording budget, international distribution, and creative control. In 1973, the Wailers released Catch a Fire, their first album with Island Records. This was reggae like the world had never heard before. Bob's lyrics were poetic, political, and spiritual. The music was hypnotic, with deep bass lines and revolutionary messages. The album didn't explode immediately, but it caught attention in England and America. Music critics praised it. Rock audiences who had never heard reggae were intrigued. Bob Marley and the Wailers started touring internationally, but success created tensions. Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer felt like Chris Blackwell was making Bob the star and treating them as backup singers. They had been equal partners for a decade, and suddenly Bob was getting all the attention and making all the decisions. Peter was angry. Bunny was tired of touring and wanted to stay in Jamaica. By 1974, both Peter and Bunny left the group. The Wailers, the trio that started in Trenchtown, were finished. Bob was devastated, but determined. He renamed the group Bob Marley and the Wailers, brought in new musicians, and kept pushing forward. He released Natty Dread in 1974 and Rastaman Vibration in 1976, and both albums were increasingly successful. Bob was finally breaking through. Reggae was becoming global, and Bob Marley was becoming the face of it. But back in Jamaica, things were falling apart. The 1970s were a violent time in Jamaican politics. The two main political parties, the People's National Party, PNP, and the Jamaica Labour Party, JLP, were at war. Gang violence connected to political factions was killing people every day. Bob's music had always carried political messages, but he tried to stay above party politics. His message was unity, not division. But powerful people wanted to use Bob for their own purposes. In 1976, the Prime Minister Michael Manley, leader of the PNP, approached Bob about performing at a free concert called Smile Jamaica. The concert was supposed to promote peace, but it was scheduled just days before a contentious election. It was clearly a political move to help Manley's campaign. Bob was conflicted. He didn't want to be used as a political pawn, but he also believed in the message of peace. He agreed to perform, but someone didn't want that concert to happen. On December 3, 1976, 2 days before the Smile Jamaica concert, armed gunmen broke into Bob Marley's home and opened fire. What happened that night would change Bob forever and raise questions that still haven't been answered. Who wanted Bob Marley dead, and why? On the evening of December 3, 1976, Bob was at his home on Hope Road in Kingston. Rita was there. Some band members were there. They were rehearsing for the Smile Jamaica concert, just 2 days away. Around 9 p.m., a car pulled up outside. 3 armed men got out and stormed into the house with guns blazing. Bob was in the kitchen when the shooting started. A bullet grazed his chest. Another hit him in the arm. He dove for cover, certain he was about to die. Rita was shot in the head. The bullet entered through her scalp, but miraculously didn't penetrate her skull. She collapsed, blood pouring down her face. Bob's manager, Don Taylor, was shot 5 times. He threw himself in front of Bob, taking bullets meant for him. Taylor survived, but barely. The gunmen fired at least 40 shots inside the house. Then they disappeared into the night as quickly as they came. The entire attack lasted maybe 2 minutes. But in those 2 minutes, Bob Marley's life changed forever. Amazingly, everyone survived. Bob's wounds were superficial. Rita's head wound was serious, but not fatal. Don Taylor was hospitalized, but would recover. But the psychological impact was devastating. Bob was terrified. Someone had tried to kill him in his own home. His wife had been shot. His manager nearly died protecting him. Who did this, and why? To this day, Nobody knows for certain. The gunmen were never caught. No arrests were ever made. Theories range from political hit. Bob was seen as supporting the PNP, so the opposing JLP might have ordered it, to gang violence, to even CIA involvement. The CIA was actively destabilizing Jamaica during this period because they feared the socialist-leaning government. What's most disturbing is that some people believe the attack was meant as a warning, not a murder. The gunmen had clear shots. They could have killed everyone easily, but they didn't. They shot to injure, to terrorize, to send a message, stay out of politics. You would think after being shot, Bob would cancel the Smile Jamaica concert. But Bob did something incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, depending on how you see it. He performed anyway. 2 days after being shot, with his arm in a bandage, Bob walked onto the stage at the National Heroes Park in Kingston in front of 80,000 people. He performed for 90 minutes, pouring his heart into every song. At one point, Bob lifted his shirt and showed the crowd his wounds. The message was clear. You can shoot me, but you can't silence me. The performance became legendary. Bob Marley had been shot and still showed up to preach peace and unity. He was more than a musician now. He was a symbol of resistance and courage. But immediately after the concert, Bob fled Jamaica. He was terrified. He didn't know who to trust. He felt like the island he loved had turned on him. Bob moved to London and wouldn't return to Jamaica for over a year. Living in London, Bob threw himself into music. He recorded the album Exodus in 1977, and it became one of the greatest albums in music history. Songs like Jamming, One Love, Three Little Birds, and the title track Exodus captured Bob's emotional journey, the pain of exile, the hope for return, the call for unity. Exodus made Bob Marley a global superstar. The album charted in multiple countries. Bob was performing in massive stadiums across Europe and America. Reggae was now mainstream, and Bob was its king. But exile weighed on Bob. He missed Jamaica. He was homesick, and he was frustrated that political violence had forced him to leave his own country. In 1978, Bob received an invitation that he couldn't refuse. Jamaica's political leaders wanted Bob to return and perform at the One Love Peace concert, where rival political factions would come together and declare a truce. Bob was skeptical, but the opportunity to genuinely promote peace in Jamaica was too important to pass up. He agreed to perform. On April 22, 1978, Bob returned to Jamaica for the first time since the assassination attempt. He took the stage at the National Stadium in Kingston, performing alongside other reggae legends. But the most iconic moment came near the end of Bob's set. He called Prime Minister Michael Manley, PNP, and opposition leader Edward Seaga, JLP, onto the stage. These two men hated each other. Their political war had killed hundreds of Jamaicans. Bob grabbed their hands and forced them to shake hands above his head while he sang One Love. The image of the two rivals holding hands, united by Bob Marley's music, became one of the most powerful moments in music history. Bob had done the impossible. He brought peace, even if just for a moment, to a divided nation. But the peace didn't last. Within months, political violence returned to Jamaica, and Bob realized that music alone couldn't fix the systemic problems plaguing his country. And while Bob Marley was trying to heal his country, something was happening inside his own body that he didn't even know about. A small injury that seemed harmless would turn into the thing that killed him, and Bob's religious beliefs would prevent him from getting the treatment that could have saved his life. In 1977, while Bob was living in London, he injured his toe playing soccer. It seemed like nothing, a small cut, a bruise, something that would heal on its own. Bob loved soccer and played constantly, so minor injuries were common. But the toe didn't heal. It got worse. A dark spot appeared under the toenail. It hurt when Bob walked, but Bob ignored it. He was busy touring, recording, building his empire. He didn't have time to worry about a toe. Finally, in 1977, Bob went to a doctor. The diagnosis was devastating: acrolentiginous melanoma, a rare and aggressive form of skin cancer that affects the palms, soles of feet, and under nails. It's extremely rare, especially in black people, but it's also extremely deadly. The doctor's recommendation was immediate and clear: amputate the toe. Remove it completely before the cancer spreads. It was a minor surgery that could save Bob's life, but Bob refused, and here's where Rastafari beliefs became a death sentence. In Rastafari, the body is sacred. Rastas believe the body is a temple and shouldn't be violated or altered. Some interpretations of Rastafari specifically prohibit amputation because it's seen as defiling the body God gave you. Bob took this seriously. He believed amputating his toe would be a violation of his faith. He believed Jah, God, would heal him naturally. He believed Western medicine was part of Babylon's system of control. So instead of amputation, Bob agreed to a compromise. The doctors removed the cancerous tissue and the nail, but left the toe intact. They grafted skin from Bob's thigh to cover the wound. The doctors warned Bob this might not be enough. The cancer could return. He needed to be monitored constantly. But Bob nodded, thanked them, and went back to making music. Despite the cancer diagnosis, Bob didn't slow down. If anything, he worked harder. He released Kaya in 1978, Survival in 1979, and Uprising in 1980. He toured relentlessly across Africa, Europe, and America. Bob saw himself as a messenger. He believed he had a divine purpose to spread Rastafari teachings and messages of liberation to the world. He couldn't stop, not for anything, not even cancer. In 1980, Bob performed at the independence ceremony for Zimbabwe, a newly liberated African nation. It was one of the most meaningful moments of his life, seeing Africa freed from colonialism, performing for 100,000 people celebrating freedom. Bob was exhausted, losing weight, and visibly unwell, but he kept going. In September 1980, Bob was jogging in Central Park in New York City when he collapsed. He couldn't continue. His body was shutting down. Friends rushed him to the hospital. Tests revealed the horrifying truth: the cancer had metastasized. It had spread from his toe to his lungs, liver, stomach, and brain. Bob Marley was dying. The doctors told Bob he had very little time left. Months at most, maybe weeks. Bob finally agreed to more aggressive treatment. He tried chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. He went to a controversial clinic in Germany, run by a doctor who claimed he could cure cancer through diet and alternative medicine. Nothing worked. The cancer was too advanced. Bob had waited too long. By early 1981, Bob knew he was dying. His body was failing. He was skeletal, weighing less than 80 pounds. His dreadlocks were falling out from chemotherapy. He could barely walk. But Bob wanted to die in Jamaica. He wanted to go home. In May 1981, Bob left Germany and boarded a plane bound for Jamaica. But during a layover in Miami, Florida, Bob's condition worsened dramatically. He was rushed to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, now University of Miami Hospital. Rita, his mother Cedella, and his children gathered at his bedside. Bob was barely conscious, drifting in and out. On May 11, 1981, at 11:45 a.m., Bob Marley died. He was 36 years old. His final words to his son Ziggy were, "Money can't buy life." Bob's body was flown back to Jamaica. The nation went into mourning. Bob Marley wasn't just a musician. He was a national hero, a prophet, an icon. On May 21, 1981, Jamaica held an official state funeral for Bob Marley. Over 100,000 people lined the streets of Kingston. The Prime Minister gave a eulogy. Bob was awarded the Order of Merit, Jamaica's third highest honor. Bob's body was then taken back to 9 Mile, the tiny village where he was born. He was buried in a chapel on his property, with his guitar, a Bible, and a bud of marijuana, a Rastafari sacrament. The poor mixed-race kid who was bullied and abandoned had become a legend. But he was gone at 36, taken by a disease that could have been stopped if he had just agreed to lose a toe. But Bob Marley's death raises an uncomfortable question that people still debate today. Did his religious beliefs kill him? Or was it something else, exploitation, lack of access to better healthcare earlier, or even something more sinister. And what happened to all the money Bob made? Here's something most people don't realize. Bob Marley died without a will. He never wrote one. Maybe he didn't think he'd die so young. Maybe he trusted that his family would figure it out. But not having a will created decades of legal nightmares. Bob's estate was worth millions, and it has only grown since his death. Today, the Bob Marley brand is worth over $130 million annually through music sales, licensing, merchandise, and even a partnership with a marijuana company called Marley Natural. But who controls all that money? Not Bob's children, at least not all of them. Rita Marley, Bob's widow, initially controlled the estate, but there were accusations of mismanagement, legal battles, and family infighting. Some of Bob's children claimed Rita and her lawyers were exploiting Bob's legacy for personal gain. The Marley family has been fighting over Bob's estate for over 40 years. Lawsuits, accusations, public feuds. It's exactly what Bob would have hated. His family torn apart by money and greed. And remember, Bob fathered 11 children with 7 different women. Not all of them are recognized equally in the estate. Some of Bob's children have grown up wealthy off his legacy. Others have struggled financially despite being Bob Marley's kids. Many of Bob's children followed him into music. Ziggy Marley, Stephen Marley, Damian Jr. Gong Marley, and K.Y. Monty Marley all became successful reggae artists. They've won Grammys, toured the world, and kept Bob's musical legacy alive. But Bob's children have also been open about how difficult it was growing up as Bob Marley's kids. The pressure to live up to the legend, the complicated family dynamics with multiple mothers, the absence of their father, who was always touring or working. One of Bob's daughters, Cedella Marley, said in an interview, "People think we had this perfect life because our father was Bob Marley, but he was gone all the time. We barely knew him. And when he died, we were so young. We lost him before we could really know who he was." In the decades since Bob's death, something troubling has happened. Bob Marley has been sanitized, commercialized, and stripped of his revolutionary message. Walk into any college dorm room, and you'll see a Bob Marley poster. Walk into any smoke shop, and you'll see Bob Marley merchandise. His face is on t-shirts, mugs, lighters, rolling papers, sold to people who have never listened to his music beyond "No Woman, No Cry." Bob has been turned into a symbol of weed and chill vibes, as if that's all he represented. But Bob's music was revolutionary. He sang about overthrowing oppressive systems, about Pan-Africanism, about spiritual liberation. He was a threat to power structures, which is likely why someone tried to kill him. Today, Bob Marley is a brand, a commodity. The very thing he sang against, Babylon's commercialization of everything sacred, has consumed his legacy. And then there are the conspiracy theories. Some people believe Bob Marley didn't die of natural causes. They point to the assassination attempt in 1976 and suggest that maybe the attack was successful, just slower than expected. One theory claims that the CIA gave Bob cancer. The story goes that a CIA agent posing as a journalist gave Bob a pair of boots with a contaminated copper wire embedded in the sole, which pricked his toe and injected him with cancer cells. Is this true? There's no concrete evidence, but we do know that the CIA was actively destabilizing Jamaica in the 1970s because they feared the socialist government. We know Bob Marley was seen as a dangerous figure whose messages of unity and resistance threatened political interests. And we know that unexplained medical conditions have been used as assassination methods before. Most historians and medical experts dismiss this theory as paranoid speculation, but the fact that people believe it shows how deeply Bob's death feels wrong. A 36-year-old man dying from a toe injury just doesn't sit right. Regardless of the conspiracies and controversies, Bob Marley's impact on music and culture is undeniable. He took reggae, a genre created in the ghettos of Jamaica, and made it global. He proved that you didn't need to compromise your message or your culture to reach the world. Bob's music gave voice to the oppressed. His songs became anthems for liberation movements across Africa, Latin America, and beyond. Get Up, Stand Up became a protest anthem. Redemption Song became a hymn for freedom fighters. Bob showed that music could be more than entertainment. It could be resistance. It could be spiritual. It could change the world. But Bob's personal life was messy. He fathered children with multiple women and didn't always support them financially or emotionally. He preached unity, but created division within his own family. He sang about love, but wasn't always loving to the people closest to him. The saddest part of Bob's story is that his death was preventable. If Bob had agreed to amputate his toe in 1977, he almost certainly would have survived. He could have lived another 40 or 50 years. He could have seen his children grow up. He could have continued making music and spreading his message. But Bob chose faith over medicine. He believed Jah would heal him. He believed amputating his toe would violate his covenant with God, and that belief killed him. Was Bob wrong to prioritize his faith? That's not for anyone else to judge. Bob lived according to his beliefs, and he died according to them too. But it's a tragedy nonetheless. A man with so much more to give, taken too soon by a choice that seemed right to him but proved fatal. Imagine if Bob Marley had lived. Imagine a Bob Marley performing at Live Aid. Imagine a Bob Marley recording music through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Imagine Bob collaborating with hip-hop artists, influencing modern music, speaking out on contemporary issues. Imagine Bob Marley at 80 years old, an elder statesman of music, watching his children and grandchildren carry on his legacy. Imagine the wisdom, the music, the messages he could have shared. But that's not the timeline we got. Instead, Bob Marley died at 36, and we're left with what ifs and the legacy of an incomplete life. Bob Marley's story is one of triumph and tragedy. A poor mixed-race kid from rural Jamaica became the voice of a generation and an international icon. He spread messages of love, unity, and resistance to every corner of the globe. But he was also human, flawed, complicated. He made mistakes with his family. He let his religious beliefs prevent him from seeking treatment that could have saved his life. And after he died, the people around him exploited his legacy for profit. Exactly what Bob fought against his entire life. Bob Marley once sang, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery." But in the end, Bob couldn't free himself from the beliefs that killed him, and his family couldn't free themselves from the money and greed that tore them apart. If you found this deep dive into Bob Marley's real story eye-opening, make sure to smash that subscribe button. We uncover the uncomfortable truths behind the legends, the stories that don't fit the sanitized narratives. Drop a comment below. Do you think Bob Marley's religious beliefs killed him? Or do you believe there's something more sinister behind his death? And what do you think Bob would say about how his legacy has been commercialized? Thanks for watching. One love. I'll see you in the next one.